until a chilly afternoon in the park. A heartbroken teen sits alone, burdened by grief and lost dreams, until a man in a red MAGA hat approaches him with an offer that will change everything. What happens next will leave you speechless. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. A chilly afternoon unfolded in the quiet park, where golden leaves whispered with the breeze. Ethan sat slumped on an old wooden bench, his sneakers scuffing the ground beneath him. His face was streaked with tears, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. Around him, life passed by. Parents pushed strollers and squirrels darted about, but none of it touched him. His world felt impossibly heavy. Not far off, David strolled through the park, his red MAGA hat perched atop his salt and pepper hair. He was lost in thought until his eyes landed on the boy. Something about Ethan's hunched shoulders and the defeat etched into his young face tugged at him. David slowed his steps, his instincts urging him to stop. He approached cautiously, his voice calm and steady. "You okay there, kid?" Ethan startled slightly but didn't look up. "I'm fine," he muttered, his tone betraying the lie. David wasn't one to press, but he also wasn't one to walk away from someone in pain. He sat on the other end of the bench, leaving space between them, and waited. Finally, Ethan's defenses cracked. "It's just... everything's falling apart," he admitted, his voice trembling. He began to speak, hesitantly at first, then pouring out his fears, the death of his father, his mom working tirelessly to keep the lights on, and the suffocating weight of knowing she couldn't afford his education. Each word came with a tear, each tear revealing the depth of his hopelessness. David listened without interrupting, his expression softening. When Ethan finished, silence hung between them for a moment. Then David spoke, his tone firm yet kind. "Look, sitting here won't fix anything. Your mom's probably worried sick about you right now. Let's get you home and figure out what we can do." Ethan shook his head, the stubbornness of youth and pain taking over. "I can't go home." "Not yet." David studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but here's the deal. You tell me more, and we'll figure out something together. I don't make promises I can't keep, but I'll try to help. No strings, no judgment." Ethan looked up at the older man for the first time, his red hat catching his eye. For a moment he hesitated, but something in David's gaze felt steady and sincere. Slowly he nodded. "Okay." The park was a quiet haven for Ethan that day, a place to escape the suffocating weight of his life at home. The crisp autumn air bit at his cheeks as he sat on the bench, staring at the leaves swirling around his feet. His father's sudden passing a year ago had left a void no amount of time seemed capable of filling. Ethan's mother, Sarah, had been doing her best, working extra shifts, juggling bills and trying to keep their small family afloat. But the cracks were showing. At school, Ethan had always been a bright student with big dreams, but grief and financial struggles had taken their toll. His grades slipped, and with them, his confidence. He felt like a burden on his mother, who was already stretched thin, and the guilt was a constant weight on his chest. That morning, everything came to a head. Sitting at their modest kitchen table, Ethan had tried to talk to Sarah about the upcoming tuition payment. Her face, lined with exhaustion, had crumpled as she admitted she couldn't afford it. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she'd whispered, tears in her eyes. "I'll figure something out, I promise. But right now, we just don't have it." The apology stung more than he wanted to admit. His frustration boiled over into an argument he regretted almost immediately. "You always say that," he'd shouted, storming out before she could respond. He hated himself for the words as soon as they left his mouth, but he couldn't bring himself to go back and face her. Instead, he wandered aimlessly, eventually ending up at the park. It's idiosyncraticness. David had no intention of getting involved in anyone else's life that day. He often came to the park to clear his mind, enjoying the quiet moments away from his busy life as a businessman and philanthropist. His red MAGA hat was perched proudly on his head, a reflection of his beliefs and his commitment to giving back to his country. Even though it often drew judgment from others, he was used to the assumptions people made about him without knowing his story. A boy who grew up with little, scraping by on his parents' sacrifices and his own hard work. As he walked, David noticed Ethan sitting on the bench, his hunched shoulders and tear-streaked face standing out against the cheerful activity around him. It was a sight David couldn't ignore. Something about the boy reminded him of himself at that age. Lost, overwhelmed, and desperate for someone to care. David approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. "You all right, kid?" he asked, his voice calm and kind. Ethan didn't look up. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his trembling voice betrayed the truth. David didn't press, but settled on the bench at a respectful distance. For a moment, neither spoke, the quiet punctuated only by the rustle of leaves. Finally, David broke the silence. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it. You don't have to, but I'm here if you want." Ethan hesitated, but something in David's tone felt safe. Slowly he began to speak, haltingly at first, then pouring out his story. He told David about losing his dad, the strain on his mom, and the crushing realization that she couldn't afford his education. "I feel so useless," he admitted, his voice cracking. "She's working herself to death, and I'm just another problem she has to deal with." David listened intently, his expression thoughtful. He could see the pain in Ethan's eyes, the way the boy was carrying more than his fair share of the world's weight. When Ethan finished, David leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "You're not a problem, Ethan. You're a kid who's been handed a tough hand, but that doesn't mean you're alone in this." "Yes." Ethan shook his head. "It doesn't matter. She can't afford it, and I can't fix it." David's heart ached at the defeat in the boy's tone. He knew that feeling all too well. "I've been where you are," he said. "I grew up with parents who barely made ends meet. There were times when we didn't know how we'd keep the lights on, let alone pay for school. But we made it through because people cared enough to help. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places." Ethan glanced at him, skeptical but curious. "Like who?" David smiled faintly. "Let's just say there are people out there who want to see you succeed, even if you don't know them yet." Ethan's brow furrowed. "I don't want charity. I don't need someone feeling sorry for me." "It's not about charity," David replied. "It's about giving someone a chance to become who they're meant to be. You have potential, Ethan. I can see that. You just need someone to believe in you." Ethan didn't respond, his mind racing with everything David had said. David nodded, understanding the stubbornness of youth. "All right, but here's the deal. You have to promise me you'll go back tonight. She's probably worried sick. And trust me, nothing good comes from staying away too long." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll go back." As they sat in silence, David's mind was already working. He couldn't walk away from this boy without doing something. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he was determined to help Ethan find his way back to hope. Ethan's return home that evening was quiet and heavy. The sun had set, casting long shadows through the living room as he walked through the door. His mother, Sarah, was waiting, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She'd been pacing for hours, her heart torn between anger and fear. The sight of him both relieved and frustrated her. "Ethan, where were you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea how worried I've been? You can't just storm out like that. You just have to work for it to slow you down before you just—" Ethan dropped his backpack onto the floor, avoiding her eyes. "I needed space," he muttered. "Space?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Ethan, I'm doing everything I can to hold this family together, and you disappearing doesn't help. I'm trying, but I can't do this alone." The weight of her words struck him like a blow. He knew she was right, but the guilt and frustration tangled inside him, leaving him unable to respond. Instead, he mumbled an apology and shuffled to his room, closing the door behind him. Alone in the dimly lit space, he sank onto his bed, feeling more trapped than ever. Meanwhile, David sat at his desk late into the night, scrolling through the contact list of the schools he owned. His mind replayed Ethan's words. "She can't afford it. I'm just another problem she has to deal with." The boy's hopelessness had struck a chord deep within David, reminding him of his own struggles as a teenager. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. The next morning, David made the call. Speaking directly to the headmaster of one of his most prestigious private schools, he explained the situation. "I've got a kid with potential but no means to access the opportunities he deserves," David said. "I want him admitted under a full scholarship. Cover everything: tuition, books, uniforms, meals, and keep my name out of it." The headmaster, accustomed to David's quiet philanthropy, agreed without hesitation. "Consider it done," he said. The week passed and life at home remained tense. Sarah worked long hours at the diner, while Ethan dragged himself through school, his mind clouded with worry and self-doubt. He tried to focus on his classes, but the overwhelming thought that his education might soon come to an end made every lesson feel futile. Then, one afternoon, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, half-heartedly working on an assignment, his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. "Hello, is this Ethan?" a polished voice asked. He looked up and pointed at the voice. Yeah. "Who's this?" "This is Ms. Reynolds from Lakeside Academy. I'm calling to inform you that you've been awarded a full scholarship to our school. Congratulations." Ethan froze, the words not registering at first. "Wait, what?" he stammered. "You've been selected for a full scholarship," Ms. Reynolds repeated. "It covers all expenses and we'd love to have you start as soon as possible." Ethan's heart raced. "But how? I didn't apply. Are you sure you have the right person?" Mrs. Reynolds chuckled. We're certain. Sometimes, opportunities find you when you least expect them. Please check your email for more details. The call ended, leaving Ethan in stunned silence. He barely noticed Sarah walking in until she spoke. "Who was that?" "It was a school. They're giving me a scholarship," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A full scholarship." Why am I still feeling vaguely anxiety and in pain? Sarah's eyes widened. "What? How? Are you sure it's not a mistake?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, shaking his head. "But it's real, Mom. They want me to start next week." The skepticism lingered in Sarah's expression, but beneath it was a flicker of hope. For the first time in a long time, it felt like a door had opened. She placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her voice softening. "If this is real, Ethan, you have to give it your all. Promise me." "I will, Mom, I promise," Ethan said, his resolve hardening. This was a chance he couldn't afford to waste. As Ethan prepared for his first day at Lakeside Academy, the disbelief and excitement swirled in equal measure. The school was everything he had dreamed of: state-of-the-art facilities, passionate teachers, and a community that valued learning. Walking through its pristine halls, he felt a spark of hope reignite within him. But even as he thrived in his new environment, questions lingered. Who had made this possible, and why? Neither Ethan nor Sarah could shake the mystery, but for now, they chose to focus on the opportunity at hand. What they didn't know was that David, from a distance, was watching Ethan's progress with quiet satisfaction, his promise to stay anonymous unwavering. Ethan had transformed in ways Sarah couldn't have imagined. Each day at Lakeside Academy brought new opportunities for growth, and Ethan embraced them with vigor. His teachers marveled at his curiosity and dedication, often commenting on his potential. He made friends, joined the debate club, and even began tutoring younger students who struggled in subjects he excelled in. His confidence grew with each small success, rekindling the dreams he thought he had lost forever. At home, Sarah watched her son blossom, her heart swelling with pride. The change in him was undeniable, yet the question lingered in her mind. Who had made this miracle possible? She had no answers, only gratitude mixed with an ache to thank the stranger who had given her son this second chance. Months passed, and one evening, a letter arrived from the school. Ethan was to be honored at an upcoming event celebrating outstanding student achievements. The letter invited Sarah as a guest of honor, recognizing the sacrifices she had made for her son. Overwhelmed with emotion, she hugged Ethan tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." The night of the event arrived, and the school's grand auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents and students filled the seats, their faces glowing with anticipation. Ethan and Sarah sat near the front, both nervous and excited. As the ceremony began, the headmaster stepped up to the podium and spoke warmly about the importance of nurturing potential, no matter the circumstances. When Ethan's name was called, Sarah's heart swelled with pride. Her son walked onto the stage, his posture confident, his face glowing with a mix of joy and humility. The audience applauded as the headmaster presented him with an award for exceptional progress and dedication. Ethan glanced at his mother, his eyes shining with gratitude. After the ceremony, as attendees mingled and shared congratulations, Sarah's gaze wandered. Among the crowd, her eyes locked onto a familiar figure standing near the back of the room. It was the man in the MAGA hat, the one she had once seen in their neighborhood. He was deep in conversation with the headmaster, his demeanor calm yet commanding. Her heart raced as realization dawned. Could it be him? Could this man have been the one to change their lives? Gathering her courage, Sarah turned to Ethan. "Do you recognize that man over there?" she asked, nodding toward David. Ethan followed her gaze and shook his head. "No, Mom. Why?" I think he might be the one who helped us," she said, her voice trembling. Before Ethan could respond, a nearby staff member overheard their conversation. "Oh, that's Mr. David. He's one of the school's key benefactors," the staff member explained. "He personally arranged Ethan's scholarship. He does this often for kids with potential." Sarah's breath caught. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and shame washed over her. She had judged David harshly, dismissing him for his beliefs and appearance. Yet here he was, the very man who had given her son a future. As David turned to leave, Sarah called out, her voice trembling, "Mr. David, please wait." David peeled away. He stopped and turned, his expression warm and kind. "Yes." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she approached him. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice breaking. "I misjudged you, and I'm so sorry. You didn't have to do what you did for Ethan, but you changed our lives. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." David smiled gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't need to apologize, Sarah. It wasn't about me. It was about Ethan and the bright future he deserves. I've been where you are, and I know how hard it can be. If I can make a difference, that's all that matters." Sarah nodded, her tears flowing freely. "You didn't just help him. You helped me see beyond my own biases. I'll never forget this." David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The world could use more kindness, Sarah. We're all in this together." As he walked away, Ethan joined his mother, who stood silently, overwhelmed by the moment. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly. She smiled through her tears and hugged him tightly. "I'm more than okay, Ethan. We're going to make him proud." Ethan struggled upright on the bed with knees giving way under his weight. And from that day forward, they did. Ethan's life took a dramatic turn for the better after receiving the scholarship. The structured environment of Lakeside Academy provided not just an education, but a sense of stability and purpose that had been missing since his father's death. Ethan thrived in the classroom, his natural curiosity reignited by engaging teachers and challenging subjects. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of belonging. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Teachers praised his dedication, peers admired his resilience, and Ethan began mentoring younger students who struggled academically. He saw pieces of himself in those kids, lost, unsure, and in need of guidance. His own experience had shown him the power of a helping hand, and he was determined to pay it forward. Driven by a desire to be the kind of support system David had been for him, in home, Sarah marveled at the change in her son. The Ethan who once seemed burdened by despair was now vibrant and full of hope. His enthusiasm for his studies brought light back into their home, and Sarah found herself reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. She couldn't help but think of David, the man she had transformed their lives through an act of selfless kindness. Sarah began to examine her own biases, realizing how quick she had been to dismiss David because of his outward identity. This introspection led her to take action. She began volunteering at a local community center, using her own experiences to help families navigating hardships. Her work not only gave her a sense of fulfillment, but also deepened her gratitude for the man who had quietly stepped in to save her son's future. Meanwhile, David continued his philanthropic work, remaining true to his belief in lifting others without seeking recognition. His legacy grew, not through grand gestures or public accolades, but through the quiet success stories of kids like Ethan, who flourished under his support. David's ability to see potential where others saw barriers made him a figure of inspiration, though he rarely stayed in the spotlight long enough for anyone to praise him directly. Months after Ethan started at Lakeside Academy, Sarah decided it was time to properly thank David. She invited him over for dinner, wanting to express her gratitude in person. David hesitated at first, ever humble about his contributions, but he eventually agreed. The evening of the dinner, the small but cozy dining room was filled with the warm aroma of homemade food. Ethan set the table with care, and Sarah fussed over the final touches, her nervous excitement evident. When David arrived, he was greeted with genuine smiles and heartfelt handshakes. The awkwardness Sarah had once felt around him was gone, replaced by deep respect and gratitude. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. They talked about Ethan's progress at school, Sarah's work at the community center, and even David's own journey of overcoming obstacles. Laughter punctuated the meal, the barriers that once divided them now distant memories. Toward the end of the evening, Ethan stood and raised his glass. "I want to say something," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "To Mr. David, you didn't just change my life. You reminded me that there are people out there who truly care. You gave me hope when I had none, and you showed me the kind of person I want to be. So, here's to second chances, and to the people who make them possible." The room fell silent for a moment before filling with applause and teary smiles. David, visibly moved, simply nodded and said, "You've done the hard work, Ethan. I just gave you a nudge. The rest was all you." As the night wound down, David prepared to leave, but not before Sarah stopped him at the door. "David," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough. You've taught me to see beyond my own assumptions, to open my heart and my mind. You didn't just save Ethan. You saved us both." David smiled warmly. "We all need a little help sometimes, Sarah. I've been there too. I'm just glad I could make a difference." As David walked into the night, Ethan and Sarah stood at the door, watching him go. Their lives had been forever changed by one man's quiet kindness, and they were determined to honor his gift by spreading that same compassion to others. Together, they knew they had found not just a second chance, but a renewed faith in the power of humanity. Kindness and understanding have the power to transform lives, even in the most unexpected ways. David's selfless actions not only gave Ethan a second chance, but also taught Sarah the profound impact of compassion and the strength it takes to confront our biases. This story is a testament to how small gestures of support can spark life-changing transformations, reminding us that hope and humanity can bridge even the widest divides. Have you ever been part of or witnessed an act of kindness that changed someone's life? Share your story in the comments below. Let's start a conversation that inspires others to believe in the power of giving and understanding. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of resilience, transformation, and hope. Together, let's build a brighter, more compassionate world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.